Sarah Martinez grew up in the dusty streets of East Los Angeles, where gunshots were more common than birdsong, and survival meant learning to fight before learning to read properly. Her father, Miguel, worked double shifts at the auto repair shop while her mother, Rosa, cleaned office buildings downtown until her hands cracked and bled. The family lived in a cramped two-bedroom apartment where the walls were thin enough to hear every argument, every sob, every dream whispered into the darkness. From the age of 5, Sarah knew she was different. While other girls played with dolls and tea sets, she collected rocks and practiced throwing them at targets she drew on the brick wall behind their building. Her accuracy was uncanny, hitting bottle caps from 30 feet away with stones no bigger than marbles. Miguel noticed his daughter's unusual coordination and enrolled her in a local boxing gym, hoping to channel her restless energy into something constructive. The gym was a sanctuary of sweat and determination, filled with fighters who had clawed their way up from nothing. Sarah's trainer, an ex-Marine named Coach Rodriguez, saw something special in the skinny 8-year-old who never backed down from a challenge. She absorbed every lesson like a sponge, memorizing footwork patterns and punch combinations with photographic precision. By age 12, she was sparring with boys twice her size and winning more often than losing. School was a different battleground entirely. Sarah struggled with traditional academics, not because she lacked intelligence, but because her mind worked differently. She could calculate angles and distances instinctively, but stumbled over algebra equations. She understood human psychology through reading facial expressions and body language, but failed written psychology tests. Teachers labeled her as having learning disabilities, but what they failed to recognize was that Sarah possessed a rare form of kinesthetic intelligence that would later prove invaluable. The turning point came during her sophomore year of high school, when a military recruiter visited their career day. Staff Sergeant Johnson spoke about opportunities in the Navy, about seeing the world and serving something greater than yourself. But it was when he mentioned the SEALs that Sarah's attention sharpened like a blade. He described the training, the mental toughness required, the fact that only the most elite warriors could earn the trident. Other students laughed when Sarah asked if women could become SEALs, but Johnson's response was serious and measured. "The Navy is changing," he said, looking directly at Sarah. "They're opening more combat roles to women. The SEALs haven't officially opened their doors yet, but the military is evolving. If you have the heart and the skills, doors that seem closed today might be open tomorrow." That night, Sarah researched everything she could about Navy SEAL training. She read about Hell Week, about candidates who quit after hours of freezing ocean water and endless physical punishment. She learned about the mental games instructors played, designed to break even the strongest minds. Instead of being deterred, Sarah felt a fire ignite in her chest. This was what she had been preparing for her entire life without knowing it. She began training with religious devotion. Every morning at 4 a.m., she ran through the empty streets of her neighborhood, building endurance that would later serve her well. She practiced swimming in the community pool, holding her breath underwater until lifeguards grew nervous and asked her to surface. She climbed rope in the gym until her hands were permanently calloused, and she studied military strategy books borrowed from the library. Miguel and Rosa worried about their daughter's obsession with military life. They had immigrated to America, hoping their children would have peaceful lives, far from the violence and instability they had fled in El Salvador. But Sarah's determination was absolute, and they gradually came to understand that fighting was not something she sought, but something she was born to do. During her junior year, Sarah faced her first real test of character. A local gang tried to recruit her younger brother, Carlos, threatening the family when he refused. The situation escalated when gang members cornered Carlos after school, demanding he carry drugs or face consequences. Sarah arrived at the confrontation and found herself outnumbered 5-1 by armed teenagers who saw her as just another obstacle. What happened next would become legend in their neighborhood. Sarah didn't back down or try to negotiate. Instead, she used every skill Coach Rodriguez had taught her, combined with a tactical awareness that surprised even herself. She identified the leader through subtle body language cues, recognized which gang members were truly committed to violence versus those who were posturing, and struck with precision that neutralized the threat without escalating it into a war. The incident caught the attention of a Navy recruiter who had been monitoring promising candidates in the area. Petty Officer First Class Thompson had served with SEALs and recognized something special in the police report that crossed his desk. A teenage girl who had defended her family against armed gang members without weapons of her own, using only hand-to-hand combat skills and strategic thinking, was exactly the kind of person the Navy needed. Thompson visited Sarah at home, speaking with her parents in Spanish and explaining the opportunities available to their daughter. He was honest about the challenges she would face, particularly as a woman trying to enter special operations. But he also recognized her potential and promised that if she committed to military service, the Navy would help her reach her full capabilities. Sarah's high school graduation was a celebration not just of academic achievement, but of transformation. The girl who had once been written off as learning disabled had developed into a young woman with laser focus and unshakable determination. Her standardized test scores were mediocre, but her physical fitness assessments broke school records. More importantly, she had developed the mental toughness that would define her military career. The decision to enlist wasn't difficult for Sarah. She had found her calling in protecting others and serving something larger than herself. The neighborhood that had shaped her would always be part of who she was, but she was ready to expand her definition of community to include the entire nation. Miguel and Rosa, despite their fears, recognized that their daughter was destined for something extraordinary. On the day she left for boot camp, Sarah stood in the doorway of their small apartment and looked around one last time. The cracked plaster walls and threadbare furniture represented struggle and sacrifice, but they also represented love and determination. These lessons would travel with her to the most challenging training environments the military could devise. Boot camp at Great Lakes Naval Training Center was Sarah's first taste of military life, and she thrived in ways that surprised even her drill instructors. The physical challenges that broke other recruits only energized her. The mental pressure designed to weed out weak candidates made her more focused. The sleep deprivation and constant stress that sent many recruits home crying actually sharpened her decision-making abilities. Her company commanders noticed that Sarah never complained, never made excuses, and never gave less than maximum effort. More importantly, she had an almost supernatural ability to motivate struggling recruits without undermining military hierarchy. She could spot a homesick 18-year-old from across the barracks and find ways to help them push through difficult moments while still maintaining the discipline required by their instructors. By the end of boot camp, Sarah had earned the respect of her peers and the attention of her superiors. Her company commander, Chief Petty Officer Williams, pulled her aside during the final week of training for a conversation that would change the trajectory of her career. "Martinez," Williams said, reviewing her file, "your test scores are solid but not spectacular. Your physical fitness scores are outstanding. But what really sets you apart is your leadership potential and your ability to perform under pressure. Have you given any thought to special operations?" Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'd like to learn more about my options, Chief." Williams smiled knowingly. "The SEALs are still officially closed to women, but there are other special operations communities that might be interested in someone with your skill set. More importantly, the military is changing faster than most people realize. If you play your cards right and continue developing your abilities, opportunities might present themselves sooner than you think." That conversation planted seeds that would grow throughout Sarah's early Navy career. She was assigned to a destroyer as a gunner's mate, a role that gave her hands-on experience with weapons systems and tactical operations. The ship deployment took her to the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, and the Horn of Africa, exposing her to real-world military operations and international conflicts. During her first deployment, Sarah's ship participated in anti-piracy operations off the coast of Somalia. When pirates attempted to board a merchant vessel, Sarah was part of the team that responded to the distress call. Her shooting accuracy during the engagement was so precise that she neutralized threats without causing unnecessary casualties, earning commendations from her commanding officer and respect from the special operations personnel who observed the action. It was during this deployment that Sarah first met Navy SEALs in person. A team was temporarily stationed on their destroyer for logistic support, and Sarah found opportunities to learn from them during off-duty hours. The SEALs were initially skeptical of the young sailor who asked detailed questions about their training and tactics, but they quickly recognized that her curiosity came from genuine professional interest rather than fangirl enthusiasm. Petty Officer First Class Jake Morrison became an informal mentor to Sarah during the deployment. Morrison had served with SEAL Team 6 and had participated in some of the most sensitive operations of the past decade. He saw in Sarah the same qualities that made successful special operators: physical courage, intellectual curiosity, emotional stability under pressure, and an absolute commitment to mission accomplishment. You know, Morrison told her one evening as they watched the sunset from the ship's deck, the teams are going to change eventually. They'll have to. The nature of warfare is evolving, and that means the warriors have to evolve too. When that happens, they're going to need people who are already prepared. Morrison began sharing training techniques and mental preparation strategies with Sarah, helping her understand the psychological demands of special operations. He taught her advanced marksmanship principles, close-quarters combat tactics, and operational planning methodologies that weren't part of standard Navy training. More importantly, he helped her develop the mental framework that would allow her to succeed in the most demanding military environments. Sarah's first deployment ended with her receiving the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal for her performance during the anti-piracy operation. More significantly, she had gained the attention of personnel officers who tracked promising candidates for special programs. Her name was added to lists of sailors who might be suitable for advanced training opportunities as they became available. Returning to port, Sarah faced a decision point that would define the rest of her military career. She could continue serving in traditional Navy roles, building a solid career with predictable advancement opportunities, or she could take risks, volunteer for challenging assignments, and position herself for opportunities that didn't yet officially exist. For Sarah, there was no real choice. She had tasted combat and found her calling. She would continue pushing boundaries until she found her place among the military's elite warriors. The foundation had been laid. A girl from East Los Angeles had transformed herself into a sailor with combat experience and special operations training. But her greatest challenges still lay ahead in training environments designed to break the strongest candidates and on mountainsides where survival would depend on skills she was only beginning to develop 2 years in her Navy career. Sarah Martinez received orders that would test everything she had learned about perseverance and determination. The Navy was quietly launching an experimental program to evaluate female candidates for special operations roles, though it wasn't officially connected to SEAL training. The program, known internally as the Special Warfare Assessment and Selection Course, would put candidates through modified versions of the most challenging military training available. Sarah was one of only 12 women selected for the pilot program, chosen from thousands of female sailors across the fleet. The selection criteria were intentionally vague, but Sarah suspected that her combat performance, physical fitness scores, and psychological evaluations had caught the attention of personnel officers looking for candidates who could handle extreme stress. The training took place at a classified facility in the mountains of Colorado, far from media attention and political pressure. The instructors were drawn from various special operations communities: Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Air Force Pararescue, and Marine Force Reconnaissance. Their mission was to determine whether women could meet the physical and mental standards required for elite military units. From the moment Sarah arrived at the facility, she understood that this was unlike any training she had previously experienced. The instructors treated all candidates with professional respect, but made it clear that gender would not be considered when evaluating performance. Standards would not be modified, expectations would not be lowered, and failure would result in immediate dismissal from the program. The first week focused on baseline assessments that pushed candidates to their physical and mental limits. Sarah found herself running mountain trails at altitude while carrying heavy packs, swimming in frigid mountain lakes, and solving complex tactical problems under extreme time pressure. The elevation and terrain were unlike anything she had experienced during her childhood in Los Angeles or her shipboard deployments. What distinguished this training from regular military programs was the psychological component. Instructors used sophisticated stress inoculation techniques designed to identify candidates who could maintain cognitive function under extreme pressure. Sarah underwent simulated interrogations, sensory deprivation exercises, and scenario-based testing that required split-second decision-making with life-or-death consequences. During the third week of training, Sarah participated in her first high-altitude mountaineering exercise. The instructor team, led by Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan, a former SEAL with extensive climbing experience, explained that mountain warfare was becoming increasingly important as conflicts shifted to remote, mountainous regions around the world. Special operations personnel needed to be comfortable operating in vertical environments where traditional tactics didn't apply. Sarah had never seen mountains like these outside of photographs. The peaks stretched endlessly into the sky, covered with snow even in summer, presenting challenges that seemed impossible to overcome. But as Sullivan explained basic mountaineering techniques, Sarah discovered that her background in boxing and her natural coordination translated surprisingly well to rock climbing and rope work. The training progression was methodical and demanding. Candidates learned to use climbing hardware, practiced not tying until they could complete complex configurations blindfolded, and studied weather patterns that could turn a routine climb into a survival situation. Sarah absorbed every lesson with the intensity she had brought to all her previous training, but she quickly realized that mountaineering required a different type of mental approach than anything she had encountered. Unlike combat situations where aggressive action often determined outcomes, mountaineering required patience, careful planning, and acceptance of natural forces beyond human control. Sarah had to learn to read rock formations, snow conditions, and weather patterns with the same attention she had previously devoted to reading human opponents. The mountain demanded respect rather than conquest, cooperation rather than domination. Her first technical climb was a relatively straightforward route on a local crag, designed to teach basic movement techniques and safety procedures. But even this simple climb challenged Sarah in unexpected ways. The exposure, the reliance on equipment, and the need to trust her climbing partner created psychological pressure that was different from anything she had experienced in combat training. Master Sergeant Tony Rodriguez, an Army Ranger with decades of mountaineering experience, became Sarah's primary climbing instructor. Rodriguez had served in Afghanistan's mountain regions and understood the tactical applications of vertical skills. He recognized that Sarah had natural talent for climbing, but needed to develop the mental discipline required for high-altitude operations. Martinez, Rodriguez said during a rest break halfway up a challenging route, "You've got the physical skills to be an excellent climber. But mountaineering isn't about conquering the rock. It's about working with natural forces to accomplish a mission. In combat zones, that mindset can mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure." Rodriguez began teaching Sarah advanced techniques that went far beyond basic mountaineering. She learned to climb in full combat gear, carrying weapons and communications equipment while navigating technical terrain. She practiced ascending and descending fixed ropes under simulated combat conditions, moving quickly and quietly to avoid enemy detection. The training scenarios became increasingly complex as Sarah's skills developed. She participated in exercises where her team had to establish observation posts on remote cliff tops, requiring them to climb undetected through enemy-controlled terrain. She learned to use climbing techniques for building entry, scaling urban structures to access targets that couldn't be reached through conventional approaches. One particularly challenging exercise required Sarah's team to conduct a simulated hostage rescue in a mountainous environment. The scenario involved climbing to a remote facility, neutralizing guards, and evacuating casualties using mountaineering techniques. The exercise tested every skill Sarah had developed: marksmanship, close-quarters combat, tactical planning, and technical climbing ability. During the approach phase of the exercise, Sarah's team encountered unexpected weather conditions that turned their planned route into a survival situation. Freezing rain and high winds made climbing extremely dangerous, but the scenario required them to continue the mission despite environmental challenges. Sarah found herself leading the team through conditions that would have been terrifying for experienced mountaineers, relying on training and instinct to keep everyone safe. The successful completion of that exercise marked a turning point in Sarah's training. Her instructors recognized that she possessed not only the technical skills required for mountain operations, but also the leadership qualities needed to guide teams through challenging situations. Her performance evaluations noted her ability to remain calm under pressure, make sound tactical decisions in rapidly changing situations, and inspire confidence in team members facing extreme challenges. As the program progressed into its final phases, Sarah began to understand that she was part of something historically significant. The military was quietly preparing for a future where gender restrictions in special operations would be eliminated, and her cohort was providing the data needed to support that transition. The pressure was enormous, not only to succeed personally, but to prove that women could meet the standards required for the military's most demanding roles. The graduation exercise was designed to test everything candidates had learned during the program. Teams were given a complex mission scenario that required them to infiltrate enemy territory, gather intelligence, and extract without detection. The exercise area covered hundreds of square miles of rugged mountain terrain, and teams had to operate independently for 5 days with minimal support. Sarah's team was assigned to gather intelligence on a simulated enemy facility located on a remote mountain peak. The mission required a technical approach march through challenging terrain, establishment of an observation post in a precarious location, and extraction under simulated enemy pressure. Weather conditions during the exercise were harsh even by mountain standards, with temperatures dropping below freezing and winds exceeding 40 miles per hour. The approach march tested every aspect of the team's mountaineering skills. They had to cross exposed ridgelines and high winds, navigate technical rock sections while carrying full mission equipment, and establish camps and locations that provided concealment while protecting them from the elements. Sarah found herself drawing on every lesson she had learned, not only about climbing techniques, but about mountain weather, campcraft, and team dynamics. Establishing the observation post required the team to spend 2 days perched on a narrow ledge, gathering intelligence while remaining undetected by opposing forces. The position offered excellent views of the target area, but provided minimal protection from wind and cold. Sarah discovered that mountaineering in combat situations required a different level of mental toughness than anything she had previously encountered. The extraction phase of the exercise provided Sarah's first real test of her ability to think creatively under pressure. The planned extraction route was compromised by enemy forces, requiring the team to improvise an alternative escape plan using only their mountaineering skills and available equipment. Sarah proposed a route that involved rappelling down a cliff face that opposing forces had dismissed as impassable, then crossing a valley using natural concealment to reach the extraction point. The rappel was technically challenging and tactically risky, but it offered the team's best chance of completing the mission successfully. Sarah volunteered to go first, establishing anchors and testing the route before committing her teammates to the dangerous descent. The cliff face was over 200 feet high, with loose rock and limited anchor points, requiring careful rope management and precise technique. As Sarah descended through the darkness, using only minimal lighting to avoid detection, she realized that this moment represented the culmination of everything she had worked toward since childhood. She was using skills developed in an East Los Angeles boxing gym, refined through Navy combat training, and perfected in the mountains of Colorado to accomplish a mission that would have been impossible for conventional forces. The successful completion of the graduation exercise earned Sarah recognition as the honor graduate of her training class. More importantly, it demonstrated that women could perform effectively in the most demanding military environments when given proper training and opportunities. The program's results would eventually contribute to policy changes that opened special operations roles to female personnel. But Sarah's greatest achievement during the program wasn't personal recognition or historical significance. She had discovered that her true strength lay not in individual performance, but in her ability to inspire and lead teams facing seemingly impossible challenges. Her instructors noted that other candidates performed better when working with Sarah, drawn to her calm confidence and tactical competence. Chief Sullivan provided Sarah's final evaluation, and his word would stay with her throughout her military career. Martinez has demonstrated exceptional ability in mountain operations and special warfare tactics. More significantly, she possesses the rare combination of technical competence, tactical awareness, and leadership presence required for the most challenging special operations missions. She represents the future of American special warfare. Upon completion of the program, Sarah received orders to join a classified special operations unit that was quietly beginning to integrate female personnel into previously male-only roles. The unit's mission focused on operations in mountainous regions where technical climbing skills were essential for mission success. Sarah would finally have the opportunity to apply her training in real-world combat situations. The transition from experimental training program to operational unit represented another significant challenge for Sarah. She would be working with male special operators who had years of combat experience and might question her presence on their teams. But Sarah approached this challenge with the same determination she had brought to every previous obstacle in her military career. Her first assignment with the unit involved deployment to a classified location where American forces were supporting Allied operations against terrorist networks operating in mountainous terrain. Sarah would finally have the opportunity to use her specialized skills in actual combat, but she would also face dangers that couldn't be replicated in any training environment. The foundation had been laid for Sarah's transition from experimental candidate to operational special warfare operator. She had proven that women could meet the physical and mental standards required for elite military units. But her greatest test still lay ahead in combat zones where mission success would depend on skills that could only be developed through experience under fire. The classified briefing room at Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan felt like stepping into another world for Sarah Martinez. Maps covered every wall, displaying mountainous terrain that made her Colorado training environment look like gentle hills. Satellite imagery showed enemy positions scattered across peaks that seemed to scrape the sky itself, connected by trails that would challenge even experienced mountaineers under peaceful conditions. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, the unit's commanding officer, had handpicked Sarah for this deployment after reviewing her training records and speaking with her instructors. Harrison had served multiple combat deployments and understood that unconventional warfare required unconventional warriors. He believed that Sarah's unique combination of climbing skills, tactical training, and calm under pressure made her ideal for the mission ahead. The Taliban have established a series of observation posts and weapons caches in the Hindu Kush Mountains, Harrison explained to the assembled team. These positions allow them to monitor and attack coalition supply convoys moving through the valley below. Traditional airstrikes aren't effective because the positions are located in caves and overhangs that provide natural protection from aerial attack. The mission would require a small team to infiltrate the mountain positions, gather intelligence on enemy capabilities, and guide precision strikes against targets that could be effectively engaged. The approach would involve technical climbing through terrain that enemy forces believed was impassable, allowing the team to achieve tactical surprise. Sarah studied the mission maps with growing excitement and concern. The objective area was located at over 12,000 feet elevation, accessible only through a series of technical climbing routes that would challenge even expert mountaineers. Weather conditions were unpredictable, with sudden storms capable of turning a routine climb into a survival situation. Enemy forces had been operating in the area for months and knew the terrain intimately. Her teammates for the mission represented some of the most experienced special operations personnel in the military. Team Sergeant Marcus Thompson was a former Army Ranger with multiple combat deployments and extensive mountaineering experience. Staff Sergeant Rick Martinez, a Navy SEAL who had trained with Sarah during her Colorado program, would serve as the team's communications specialist and medical officer. Sergeant First Class David Shun, an Air Force combat controller, would coordinate air support and precision strikes. The team dynamic was crucial for mission success, and Sarah quickly understood that her acceptance would depend on demonstrated competence rather than any official integration policies. Thompson, in particular, was skeptical about including a female operator in such a dangerous mission, though he kept his concerns professional and focused on tactical considerations. Martinez, Thompson said during their first team meeting, "This isn't a training exercise. The enemy we're facing has been fighting in these mountains for generations. They know every trail, every cave, every position where they can set up an ambush. If someone makes a mistake, we all pay the price. Are you absolutely certain you're ready for this?" Sarah met Thompson's gaze steadily and responded with quiet confidence. "Sergeant, I understand the risks. I've been preparing for this mission my entire military career. I won't be the weak link in this team." The pre-mission training period allowed team members to develop the trust and coordination essential for success. Sarah participated in live-fire exercises, practiced medical procedures under stress, and refined climbing techniques specific to the terrain they would encounter. Her teammates gradually recognized that she brought capabilities to the team that enhanced rather than compromised their effectiveness. One evening during the training period, Rick Martinez approached Sarah as she practiced rope techniques on a climbing wall outside their temporary barracks. Rick had been supportive of Sarah's inclusion in special operations programs, but he also understood the cultural challenges she faced in gaining acceptance from traditional special operators. "You know," Rick said, checking Sarah's anchor points with professional interest, "Thompson's not questioning your abilities because you're female. He's questioning them because he cares about bringing everyone home alive. That's actually a good sign. It means he's already thinking of you as part of the team." Rick's observation proved accurate during the team's final training exercise. When Sarah successfully led the team through a challenging night climb, establishing routes, and managing equipment with professional competence, Thompson's attitude shifted from skeptical evaluation to confident acceptance. Sarah had earned her place through demonstrated ability rather than official policy. The mission launch came during a new moon phase that would provide maximum concealment during the team's approach march. Weather forecasts predicted clear conditions for the first 48 hours, followed by a possible storm system that could complicate extraction operations. The team would have a narrow window of opportunity to reach their objective, gather intelligence, and call in precision strikes before weather forced them to withdraw. Sarah felt a familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness as the team conducted final equipment checks before departure. She carried the same basic load as her teammates: weapons, ammunition, communications equipment, and survival gear totaling over 60 pounds. Additionally, she carried specialized climbing hardware that would allow the team to establish routes through terrain that ground forces couldn't access. The insertion was conducted by helicopter to a landing zone located 15 miles from the objective area. The distance was necessary to avoid alerting enemy forces to the team's presence, but it meant the team would have to cover challenging terrain on foot while carrying full mission equipment. Sarah had trained for this scenario extensively, but she understood that actual combat conditions would test her endurance and mental toughness in ways that training couldn't replicate. The first 12 hours of the mission proceeded according to plan. The team moved through lower elevation terrain using established trails, making good time toward their objective while avoiding enemy patrols. Sarah's role during this phase was to scout potential climbing routes and identify locations where the team could establish base camps before beginning their technical ascent. As the team gained elevation and approached more challenging terrain, Sarah's specialized skills became increasingly important. She identified anchor points, tested rock quality, and planned routes that would allow the team to move efficiently while minimizing exposure to enemy observation. Her confidence in the mountains was evident to her teammates, who began deferring to her judgment on technical climbing decisions. The transition from hiking to technical climbing occurred at dawn on the second day, as the team reached the base of a cliff system that provided access to the enemy-occupied high ground. Sarah studied the rock face through binoculars, identifying weaknesses and planning a route that would take advantage of natural features while avoiding areas where the team would be silhouetted against the sky. The good news is that the rock looks solid, Sarah briefed her teammates. The challenging news is that we'll need to complete the entire ascent without being detected. There's a natural ledge system about halfway up that will provide a rest point, but above that will be committed to the route with no opportunity for retreat. Thompson studied the cliff face and nodded his approval of Sarah's route selection. How long do you estimate for the ascent? For hours if conditions remain stable, Sarah replied. Longer if we encounter weather or have to move slowly for noise discipline. Once we're above the ledge system, we need to complete the climb quickly because there's no shelter if conditions deteriorate. The ascent began with Sarah leading the first pitch, establishing anchors, and managing the rope system that would allow her teammates to follow safely. The technical difficulty was moderate by climbing standards, but the addition of combat equipment and the need for absolute noise discipline made every movement challenging and deliberate. As Sarah climbed, she felt the familiar rhythm of mountain movement that she had developed during training. Each placement of her hands and feet was calculated not only for safety and efficiency, but also for stealth and speed. She was acutely aware that enemy forces might be located anywhere above them, and that discovery would result in the team being trapped on the cliff face with no escape route. The halfway ledge provided a brief opportunity for the team to rest and reorganize before continuing the ascent. From this position, Sarah could see enemy positions scattered across the peaks above them, confirming intelligence reports about the scale and sophistication of Taliban operations in the area. She used her spotting scope to identify specific targets and began developing the tactical picture that would guide subsequent strike operations. "I count at least 6 prepared positions," Sarah whispered into her radio, communicating with the team's intelligence specialists who were monitoring from below. Multiple cave entrances, prepared fighting positions, and what appears to be equipment storage areas. This is a significant enemy stronghold. The final pitch to the summit required Sarah to lead through the most challenging terrain of the entire route. The rock was steeper and less secure, requiring advanced climbing techniques and careful equipment management. More significantly, the team would be exposed and vulnerable during this phase, with no opportunity to retreat if they encountered enemy forces. Sarah moved methodically up the final cliff section, testing each hold before committing her weight and planning each move to maintain 3 points of contact with the rock. Her breathing was controlled and steady despite the physical demands of climbing at altitude while carrying combat equipment. She was completely focused on the immediate challenges of movement and navigation. The moment Sarah reached the summit and gained a position where she could observe enemy activities directly was both triumphant and terrifying. She was closer to active Taliban positions than any coalition forces had been in months, with an unobstructed view of their operations and capabilities. But she was also in extreme danger, alone and exposed while her teammates completed their own ascents. Through her spotting scope, Sarah could see enemy fighters moving between positions, carrying weapons and supplies along trails that connected their mountain strongholds. She observed communications equipment, heavy weapons positions, and supply caches that represented significant tactical intelligence. Most importantly, she identified command and control positions that could be targeted to disrupt the entire enemy network. As her teammates joined her on the summit, Sarah briefed them on her observations and began developing target priorities for the precision strikes that would follow. The intelligence they gathered during the next 12 hours would guide airstrikes that could eliminate a major enemy threat to coalition supply lines. But Sarah's greatest discovery wasn't related to enemy positions or tactical intelligence. She realized that she had found her true calling in this combination of technical climbing, tactical operations, and leadership under pressure. She was exactly where she belonged, using every skill she had developed to serve her country in situations where conventional forces couldn't operate. The mission was proceeding perfectly, with valuable intelligence being gathered and strike operations being planned. Sarah had proven her capabilities to her teammates and demonstrated that women could contribute meaningfully to the most demanding special operations missions. But the most dangerous phase of the operation was still ahead, and enemy forces were beginning to suspect that coalition forces had infiltrated their mountain strongholds. What Sarah couldn't know was that Taliban commanders had noticed subtle changes in coalition patrol patterns and communication intercepts that suggested special operations activities in their area. They were beginning to implement security measures that would soon threaten not only the mission, but the lives of everyone on Sarah's team. The morning of the third day brought ominous weather changes that immediately concerned Sarah Martinez as she monitored conditions from the team's concealed observation post. Dark clouds were building over the higher peaks, and the wind patterns suggested that a major storm system was approaching faster than meteorologists had predicted. More troubling were the changes in enemy activity patterns that indicated Taliban forces were becoming aware of coalition presence in their area. Through her spotting scope, Sarah observed increased radio communications between enemy positions, additional sentries posted at key locations, and patrol activities that suggested a systematic search for infiltrators. Team Sergeant Marcus Thompson shared her concerns as he reviewed the intelligence they had gathered over the past 36 hours. "Something's changed," Thompson said quietly, studying enemy positions through his own optical equipment. "They're acting like they know we're here, but they haven't been able to pinpoint our location yet. We need to complete our mission and extract before they figure out exactly where we are." The team had successfully gathered extensive intelligence on Taliban operations, identifying command positions, weapons caches, and supply routes that could be targeted by precision airstrikes. Staff Sergeant Rick Martinez had established reliable communications with air support elements, and Sergeant First Class David Chun had developed strike packages that would maximize damage to enemy capabilities while minimizing civilian casualties. But the approaching storm and increased enemy activity created a tactical dilemma that required immediate resolution. The team could call in airstrikes immediately and attempt extraction before weather conditions deteriorated, or they could wait for optimal strike conditions and risk being trapped by both enemy forces and mountain weather. Sarah studied the approaching storm system with growing concern. Her experience in mountain weather patterns suggested that conditions would become dangerous for both climbing operations and helicopter extraction within the next 6 to 8 hours. The team needed to begin their descent soon or risk being trapped on the mountain until the storm passed, which could take several days. "I recommend we initiate strikes immediately and begin extraction," Sarah advised Thompson. "Weather conditions are deteriorating faster than predicted, and enemy activity suggests they're close to discovering our position. We have good intelligence, and waiting longer increases our risk without significant operational benefit." Thompson considered Sarah's assessment alongside input from other team members. Chun confirmed that air support was available for immediate strikes, while Rick Martinez reported that extraction helicopters were on standby, but would be grounded once storm conditions reached the area. The tactical situation favored immediate action. The decision to initiate airstrikes was made at noon, with precision munitions scheduled to impact enemy positions beginning at 1,400 hours. The team would observe strike results, conduct bomb damage assessment, and begin their descent to the extraction point immediately afterward. The timeline was tight, but it offered their best chance of completing the mission successfully while avoiding enemy forces and severe weather. Sarah began preparing climbing equipment for the descent, while her teammates coordinated final strike details with air support elements. The descent route would be different from their ascent path, taking advantage of terrain features that provided better concealment but required more technical climbing skills. Sarah would again lead the descent, establishing anchors and managing rope systems to ensure her teammates could move quickly and safely. The first precision strike impacted the primary Taliban command position at exactly 1,400 hours, creating a massive explosion that echoed across the mountain range. Secondary explosions indicated that the strike had hit ammunition storage areas, confirming intelligence estimates about enemy capabilities. Additional strikes targeted communication sites, weapons positions, and supply caches identified during the team's surveillance. Sarah documented strike results through her spotting scope while simultaneously preparing equipment for immediate departure. The explosions had achieved their tactical objectives, but they had also alerted every enemy force in the region to coalition presence. Taliban fighters would soon be converging on the area, searching for the coalition forces who had guided the precision strikes. The team began their descent 30 minutes after the final airstrike, moving quickly but carefully down the technical route that Sarah had identified during their ascent. The rock was more challenging for descent operations, requiring careful rope management and constant attention to anchor placements. Sarah led the descent with the same competence she had demonstrated during the ascent, but she was acutely aware that time pressure was increasing their risk exposure. Halfway through the descent, Sarah noticed movement in the valley below that immediately triggered alarm. Taliban forces were moving along trails that intersected the team's planned extraction route, and their movement patterns suggested coordinated search operations rather than random patrol activity. Even more concerning, some enemy fighters were carrying communications equipment that indicated they were in contact with higher command elements. "We have a problem," Sarah reported to Thompson through the tactical radio network. "Enemy forces are moving to block our extraction route. It looks like they anticipated our descent path and positioned forces to intercept us." Thompson confirmed Sarah's observations from his position higher up the cliff face. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, with enemy forces approaching from multiple directions and weather conditions continuing to worsen. The team faced the possibility of being trapped between advancing Taliban fighters and mountain terrain that would become impassable in severe weather. The realization that their mission had been compromised came gradually, as Sarah and her teammates began identifying evidence that suggested their operations had been predicted rather than discovered. Enemy troop movements were too coordinated and too rapid to represent reactions to the airstrikes alone. Someone had provided Taliban forces with advance warning about coalition special operations activities in the area. Rick Martinez was the first to voice what everyone was beginning to suspect. "This feels like we walked into a trap," he said during a brief halt in their descent. "Enemy forces were positioned to intercept our extraction before we even called in the airstrikes. Someone knew we were coming." The implications were chilling and immediate. If Taliban forces had advance warning about the mission, they might also know details about extraction plans, support operations, and follow-on activities. The team was not only trapped on a mountain, but potentially facing enemies who understood their capabilities and limitations better than they had realized. Sarah continued leading the descent while her mind raced through tactical options for dealing with the deteriorating situation. Traditional extraction was no longer possible, given enemy forces positioned along all obvious routes to the landing zone. Weather conditions were eliminating helicopter support options. The team would need to find alternative solutions using only their organic capabilities and whatever resources they could improvise. As the team reached the base of the cliff system and began moving through lower elevation terrain, Sarah identified a potential solution that drew on her specialized climbing skills and mountain experience. Instead of moving toward the primary extraction point, where enemy forces were waiting, the team could move laterally along the mountain slopes to reach terrain that would be impossible for Taliban fighters to access without technical climbing equipment. "I know a way out," Sarah told Thompson during their next halt. "There's a ridge system that connects to our current position, but reaching it requires crossing exposed terrain and completing some technical climbing. Enemy forces won't be able to follow us there, but we'll need to establish an alternative extraction point." Thompson studied Sarah's proposed route through his map and optical equipment. The terrain was indeed challenging enough to prevent enemy pursuit, but it would require the team to cross areas where they would be exposed to observation and potentially long-range fire. More significantly, the alternative extraction point would be difficult for helicopters to access even under optimal weather conditions. The decision to attempt Sarah's alternative route was made when enemy forces began advancing up the mountain slopes toward the team's position. Staying in their current location meant certain contact with superior numbers of enemy fighters who knew the terrain intimately. Moving toward the primary extraction point meant advancing directly into Taliban positions that had been established to intercept them. Sarah's route offered the only realistic chance of avoiding enemy forces, though it would test every aspect of the team's mountain warfare capabilities. The route required crossing a steep slope system that was exposed to observation from enemy positions, followed by technical climbing to reach ridge terrain that would provide concealment and access to alternative extraction options. The movement across exposed terrain was the most dangerous phase of the operation. Sarah led the team in a series of bounds, using natural terrain features for concealment while covering ground as rapidly as possible. Enemy forces had spotted their movement and were directing fire toward their position, but the range and terrain angles made accurate shooting difficult. During the exposure crossing, Sarah demonstrated leadership qualities that earned her teammates complete confidence. She remained calm under fire, made sound tactical decisions about movement timing and route selection, and provided the steady presence that kept the team focused on mission accomplishment rather than fear of enemy contact. The technical climbing phase required Sarah to establish anchors and rope systems while under potential enemy observation. Taliban fighters were attempting to maneuver into positions where they could direct effective fire at the team, but Sarah's route selection had taken advantage of terrain features that provided natural protection during the most vulnerable phases of the climb. As the team reached the ridge system and gained positions that provided concealment from enemy forces, Sarah coordinated with Chun to establish communications with extraction helicopters and develop plans for pickup from the alternative site. Weather conditions were continuing to deteriorate, but the new location offered better protection from wind and improved approach routes for aircraft. The successful extraction was completed just as the storm system reached full intensity, bringing snow, high winds, and visibility conditions that would have made any helicopter operations impossible. Sarah's route selection and leadership had enabled the team to complete their mission and escape enemy forces despite being compromised by intelligence failures. During the flight back to base, Thompson provided Sarah with feedback that would influence her military career for years to come. "Martinez, your performance during this mission was exceptional. You didn't just demonstrate technical competence in mountain operations. You showed the kind of tactical thinking and leadership under pressure that defines the best special operators. But the mission had also revealed serious security vulnerabilities that threatened future operations. Someone with access to classified operational details had provided enemy forces with information that nearly resulted in the team's capture or death. Sarah and her teammates would soon be involved in investigations designed to identify the source of the intelligence breach and prevent similar compromises in future missions. The successful completion of the mission, despite being compromised, had demonstrated Sarah's capabilities in actual combat conditions. She had proven that women could contribute meaningfully to the most demanding special operations missions. But she had also learned that success in special operations required constant vigilance against threats that could come from unexpected sources. The mission had ended successfully, with valuable intelligence gathered, enemy capabilities significantly degraded, and all team members safely extracted. But Sarah's greatest challenges still lay ahead, as enemy forces who had nearly captured her began developing plans for revenge against the coalition operators who had disrupted their mountain strongholds. The next phase of her military career would test not only her technical skills, but her ability to survive in environments where the enemy knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of accomplishing 6 months after the compromised mission in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Sarah Martinez found herself assigned to an even more dangerous operation that would test every skill she had developed throughout her military career. Intelligence sources had identified a high-value Taliban commander operating from a remote mountain compound that was considered virtually impregnable by conventional forces. The target, known only as the Engineer, had been responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces across eastern Afghanistan and had personally ordered the execution of captured American personnel. The compound was located on a narrow ridge system surrounded by vertical cliff faces that rose over 800 feet from the valley floor. Traditional airstrikes were ineffective due to the compound's position inside natural cave systems that provided protection from aerial attack. Ground assault was impossible because the only access routes were heavily defended and could be observed from miles away. Special operations planners had concluded that the target was effectively beyond reach using conventional tactics. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison called Sarah into his office for a classified briefing that would change the course of her military career. Harrison had been tracking intelligence about the Engineer for months, developing operational concepts that could neutralize this critical enemy leader. Sarah's unique combination of climbing expertise, special operations training, and combat experience made her the key to a mission that no one else could accomplish. Harrison began, spreading detailed topographical maps across his desk. We've identified a possible approach route that could get a small team into striking distance of the Engineer's compound. The route requires technical climbing skills that exceed anything our other operators possess. We need someone who can lead a team up an 800-foot cliff face in darkness, establish a position where precision shooters can engage the target, and guide the team back down under potential enemy fire. Sarah studied the maps with growing excitement and concern. The proposed route was technically challenging even under ideal conditions, requiring advanced climbing techniques and specialized equipment. Attempting to climb at night, while carrying combat equipment, with the possibility of enemy contact during extraction, would test the absolute limits of human capability and equipment reliability. The intelligence about the Engineer's location had come from a captured Taliban communications specialist who provided detailed information about the compound's layout, security procedures, and the target's movement patterns. However, recent security breaches had made special operations planners cautious about trusting any intelligence sources completely. The mission would need to proceed with the assumption that enemy forces might have some advance warning. Sarah's teammates for this mission were selected based on their specialized skills and proven reliability under extreme stress. Master Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison, her former mentor who had trained with SEAL Team 6, would serve as the team's senior sniper and tactical leader. Staff Sergeant Alex Rodriguez, an Army Ranger with extensive mountain warfare experience, would provide close protection during climbing operations and coordinate extraction procedures. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, an Air Force combat controller and accomplished climber, would manage communications and air support coordination. The mission planning phase required Sarah to develop climbing strategies that had never been attempted in combat operations. The 800-foot cliff face was steeper and more technically demanding than anything she had encountered during training, with sections that would require aid climbing techniques using specialized hardware. More challenging, the team would need to complete the ascent in total darkness to avoid detection by enemy sentries. Sarah spent weeks studying photographs and satellite imagery of the cliff face, identifying potential anchor points, planning rest positions, and calculating equipment requirements for the ascent. She consulted with military mountaineering experts and civilian climbing specialists to develop techniques that would allow the team to move quickly and quietly through vertical terrain while carrying sniper weapons and communications equipment. The training for the mission pushed Sarah and her teammates to their physical and mental limits. They practiced climbing in complete darkness using only tactile navigation, developed techniques for moving heavy weapons systems up cliff faces, and refined extraction procedures that would allow them to descend rapidly under enemy fire. Each training scenario was more challenging than the last, designed to prepare the team for conditions that would exceed anything they might encounter in actual combat. During one particularly demanding training exercise, Sarah found herself leading the team up a cliff face in freezing rain and high winds, conditions that made climbing extremely dangerous even for experienced mountaineers. The exercise was designed to test the team's ability to continue mission execution despite environmental challenges that would normally require abandoning climbing operations. Halfway through the ascent, Sarah's primary anchor point failed, leaving her hanging from a single piece of protection while managing the rope system for her teammates. The failure occurred at a point where retreat would be as dangerous as continuing forward, requiring Sarah to make immediate tactical decisions while maintaining calm leadership of her team. "Rodriguez, I need you to establish a backup anchor at your position," Sarah called down through the storm. "Santos, prepare to take over lead climbing duties if my current anchor fails. Morrison, be ready to provide immediate medical support if anyone falls." Sarah's response to the equipment failure demonstrated the mental toughness and tactical thinking that had earned her selection for the most demanding special operations missions. Instead of allowing fear or equipment problems to compromise mission execution, she adapted her climbing strategy and led the team through conditions that would have defeated less experienced operators. The successful completion of the training exercise convinced mission planners that Sarah's team was ready for the actual operation. More importantly, it had demonstrated that female special operators could perform effectively in the most demanding combat environments when provided with proper training and equipment. Sarah had become living proof that military effectiveness was determined by capability rather than gender. The mission launch occurred during a new moon phase that provided maximum darkness for the team's approach and ascent. Weather forecasts predicted clear conditions for the first 24 hours, followed by possible storms that could complicate extraction operations. Intelligence updates suggested that the engineer would be present at the compound during their planned assault window. Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission mixture of excitement and nervousness as the team conducted final equipment checks at their forward operating base. She was carrying over 70 pounds of specialized climbing equipment in addition to standard combat gear, including ropes, anchors, and hardware that would allow the team to establish routes up the cliff face. The weight was manageable, but it would make every aspect of the climbing more challenging and physically demanding. The insertion was conducted by helicopter to a landing zone located 12 miles from the objective area. The distance was necessary to avoid alerting enemy forces to the team's presence, but it meant a challenging approach march through difficult terrain while carrying full mission loads. Sarah had trained extensively for this phase, but she understood that actual combat conditions would test her endurance and navigation skills in ways that training couldn't completely replicate. The approach march proceeded smoothly for the first 8 hours, with the team making good time through lower elevation terrain while avoiding enemy patrols and observation posts. Sarah's role during this phase was to scout the route ahead, identify potential climbing hazards, and ensure that the team reached the base of the cliff system without being detected by enemy forces. As the team approached the cliff base in pre-dawn darkness, Sarah began her detailed assessment of climbing conditions and route options. The rock face was more challenging than photographs had suggested, with sections of loose stone and limited anchor opportunities that would require creative problem-solving and advanced climbing techniques. More concerning, Sarah could see evidence of enemy presence on the ridge above, including sentries and patrol activities that had not been reported in intelligence briefings. The ascent began at 0300 hours, with Sarah leading the first pitch while her teammates managed equipment and provided security at the base of the cliff. The climbing was technically demanding even by expert standards, requiring precise technique and careful equipment management in complete darkness. Sarah navigated by touch and instinct, testing each hold before committing her weight and planning each move to maintain 3 points of contact with the rock. The first 200 feet of the ascent proceeded according to plan, with Sarah establishing solid anchors and efficient rope systems that allowed her teammates to follow quickly and quietly. The rock quality was better than expected in this section, providing reliable anchor points and positive holds that allowed for smooth upward progress. Sarah's confidence in her route selection and climbing abilities grew with each successful pitch. The middle section of the cliff presented unexpected challenges that tested Sarah's ability to adapt climbing strategies under pressure. Loose rock and limited anchor options forced her to develop alternative route selections while hanging from marginal holds in exposed positions. The technical difficulty was approaching the limits of what could be accomplished while carrying combat equipment and maintaining noise discipline. During the most challenging pitch, Sarah found herself making moves that required complete commitment to holds she couldn't properly test in darkness. The consequences of a fall at this point would be catastrophic, not only for Sarah personally, but for the entire mission. Her teammates waited in exposed positions below, trusting her judgment and climbing skills to guide them safely to the ridge above. Sarah completed the difficult section by drawing on every technique she had learned during her climbing career, combining military training with skills developed in civilian mountaineering environments. She used aid climbing techniques to bypass sections with poor natural holds, placed creative anchor systems that provided security in marginal rock, and maintain the calm focus required for precise technical movement under extreme stress. The final 200 feet to the ridge required Sarah to navigate around enemy positions that were closer than intelligence had indicated. Taliban sentries were posted at locations that provided observation over the entire cliff face, requiring Sarah to modify her route to take advantage of natural terrain features that would provide concealment during the most vulnerable phases of the ascent. As Sarah reached the ridge and gained her first view of the engineer's compound, she realized that the mission was more complex than original planning had suggested. The compound was larger and more heavily defended than intelligence reports had indicated, with multiple buildings, extensive security positions, and communications equipment that suggested coordination with other Taliban units in the area. Sarah established a concealed position where Morrison could deploy his sniper system while she guided the rest of the team to the ridge. The shot distance to the engineer's expected location was over 600 meters, requiring precision marksmanship under challenging environmental conditions. Wind patterns on the ridge were unpredictable, and the target would be visible for only brief periods as he moved between buildings. The team spent 4 hours in position, gathering intelligence, and waiting for the engineer to appear in Morrison's scope. During this period, Sarah maintained security and planned extraction routes while monitoring enemy activities throughout the compound. She observed patrol patterns, identified communication sites, and developed target priorities for the precision strikes that would follow the sniper engagement. The shot opportunity came suddenly, when the engineer emerged from the main building and moved across an open courtyard where Morrison had a clear line of sight. The range was challenging, but Morrison's marksmanship skills and specialized equipment were designed for exactly this type of engagement. Sarah provided wind estimation and range confirmation as Morrison prepared for the shot. The single precision shot eliminated the engineer instantly, confirming successful mission accomplishment after months of planning and preparation. But the shot also alerted every enemy force in the compound to coalition presence, beginning a race against time as Sarah led her team toward extraction while under increasing enemy pressure. The descent was far more dangerous than the ascent, as enemy forces now knew coalition operators were on the cliff face and began directing fire toward their position. Sarah had to establish rappel anchors and manage rope systems while under direct fire, requiring her to balance speed against safety in situations where mistakes would be fatal. Taliban fighters attempted to position themselves where they could fire directly down the cliff face at the descending team. Sarah countered this threat by selecting descent routes that took advantage of terrain features providing natural protection and by using tactical climbing techniques that minimized exposure to enemy fire. Halfway through the descent, Sarah's rope became tangled in loose rock, leaving her hanging in an exposed position while enemy fire impacted the cliff face around her. Instead of panicking or calling for help, Sarah calmly untangled the rope and continued her descent, maintaining the steady leadership that kept her team focused on mission accomplishment. The team reached the base of the cliff and began moving toward their extraction point, while Taliban forces attempted to pursue them down the mountain. Sarah's route selection and tactical movement techniques allowed the team to maintain separation from enemy forces while moving toward helicopter pickup zones. The extraction was completed successfully, with all team members safely recovered and the engineer confirmed eliminated. The mission was considered one of the most successful special operations achievements of the war, demonstrating capabilities that conventional forces couldn't match and eliminating a high-value target that had been considered untouchable. During the flight back to base, Morrison provided Sarah with recognition that would define her military legacy. "Martinez, what you accomplished on this mission goes beyond exceptional climbing or tactical skills. You led this team through impossible conditions and delivered results that will save coalition lives for years to come. You've proven that the future of special operations includes operators like you." But Sarah's personal satisfaction came not from recognition or career advancement, but from a knowledge that her skills had been used to protect other service members and advance American interests in the most challenging environments. She had found her calling in combining technical expertise with tactical leadership, using specialized capabilities to accomplish missions that others couldn't attempt. The successful mission established Sarah as one of the military's premier mountain warfare specialists and opened opportunities for her to train other operators in advanced climbing techniques. More importantly, it demonstrated that women could excel in the most demanding special operations roles when given proper training and opportunities. Years later, when military historians studied the integration of women into special operations forces, Sarah's career would be recognized as defining the standards and expectations for female operators in elite military units. But for Sarah, the greatest achievement was simpler. She had used every skill developed since childhood in East Los Angeles to serve her country in situations where others couldn't operate, proving that determination and training could overcome any barrier that society or circumstances might impose. The girl who had once thrown rocks at targets on a brick wall had become a warrior whose precision and courage saved lives in the most dangerous places on Earth. Sarah Martinez had not only proven that women could succeed in special operations, but had redefined what success looked like for the next generation of military leaders.